Thank you very much, and welcome to our conference, A Changing Central Asia in Greater Eurasia, and thank you for braving the 2 inches of snow that we had over the past couple of days. So I'm delighted to introduce to you the Dean of the School of Foreign Service, Joel Hellman. Prior to joining Georgetown in 2015, Dean Hellman served at the World Bank's first chief institutional economist, and previously he directed the World Bank's Fragile and Conflict-Affected States Division. He's worked in nearly 50 countries across 4 continents, and he's also taught both at Columbia and Harvard University, and he did begin his professional life as an expert on this area. So please join me in welcoming Dean Joel Hellman.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to spring in Washington, D.C. I'm sure all of you are going to head out to the cherry blossoms. If you bring a hairdryer with you, you may be able to sort of melt the ice around the cherry blossoms and see some of them. This is the peak of cherry blossom season in Washington. And if the sun does come out, there'll be some actually beautiful blooms in various different parts, especially at the tidal basin, which I hope you might be able to see. It's wonderful to be here. First of all, let me thank all of you for coming and for braving this wonderful spring weather to come. Let me thank very much Chevron and Amy Conroy for helping us put this together and supporting us on this important set of topics. And of course, let me thank CERES and the whole team at CERES for putting this together. This is a particular interest of mine. As you suggested, I started my career in this area, and I think that once you work in this region, once you work in this area, it gets very much into the DNA and the bloodstream, and one never loses the passion and the interest for this extraordinarily rich, fascinating region. You will have a lot of opportunity to discuss what's happening in Central Asia, the remarkable changes that are underway in the region and the world surrounding it. I want to just spend a couple of minutes letting you know where you are and how that fits into the broader scheme of what you're talking about today. So CERES, as you know, is hosted in the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. The School of Foreign Service is the oldest school of international affairs in the United States, and we are about to come up to our 100th anniversary in 2019. And because of that, we are always deeply ingrained and deeply thinking about the history that led to the creation of the school and what it means for the current day. And so I do want to take you back a bit to the year when this school was created in 1919. In 1919, the world, of course, had just come out of what had been the most devastating global conflict ever seen at that point. More people were killed in World War I than had been killed in all conflicts combined up until that date, right? So there was a remarkable seething of fear, uncertainty, and concern about the future to make sure that devastation on that scale never happened again. In 1919, in the year this school was created, Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States, got on a steamship in early January of 1919, went to Paris, and he would proceed to stay in Paris for 6 full months with a team of about 200 negotiators, diplomats, and others from the U.S. side. He joined the Prime Minister of the UK, David Lloyd George, the Prime Minister of France, Clemenceau, the Prime Minister of Japan, and delegates from about 70 nations. And every single day, for virtually the entire 6 months with one sort of 2 to 3 week break in between, they sat and negotiated for upwards of 6 to 8 hours a day the future shape of the world after the war. Presidents, prime ministers, delegations from all around the world sitting together to think about the shape of the world to come. There were a lot of remarkable things that were generated in that time. The whole idea and the commitment to liberal internationalism, which Woodrow Wilson is so associated with. The whole notion of the role of self-determination and the importance of nationhood and respect for nationhood came out of that period. Of course, a lot of tremendous mistakes were also made in that period. It obviously did not achieve its goal of preventing violence, and only not very long afterwards, the world was engulfed and enmeshed in another form of violence. So there were tremendous and important lessons to be learned about how nations should be treated, how nations should be respected. How do you bring nations together to discuss the future of the world order? But there was this intense time in 1919 in which everything seemed to be shifting, everything seemed to be changing. The world was on the cusp of something new. New powers were emerging, old powers were receding, and the shape of the world was sort of changing. That was 1919, and this remarkable notion that presidents would get on a steamship and go away for 6 months is something I think that some people would now like to see again in multiple countries. But we're never going to get to a point in which we bring the world's leaders together in that kind of sustained period. But if you think about it, and this is where we come to the topic of today's conference, as we approach 2019, although thank God we are not in a period in which we are coming out of a devastating global conflict, although there are still many conflicts ongoing that are still taking lives and treasure. But we are in a period in which some of the basic parameters of what has shaped the current global order are all being questioned, are all being debated, are all being reconsidered. First of all, the shape of powers that are going to determine the future of the world order are changing dramatically. And if there's any region that understands that better, it's Central Asia. The role of China, the role of Russia, the role of the United States, more and more important regional powers. That's all redistributing, all changing, all sort of shaping and reshaping. And where that's going to come out, we really don't know. How the economy is going to reshape. If you think about the One Belt, One Road initiative that China is engaging on now, and what that means in Central Asia, which I know is going to be an important topic for you to discuss. If you think about the role of Russia is playing, and its insistence that national identity, national sort of sovereignty, respect for its power be an important part of the future shape of the world order and what that means and how it engages in the near abroad. If you think about the United States and how it is rethinking its role in the world, the debates we're having here in the United States over the future of American global leadership, over how far the U.S. wants to go in maintaining its position that it's had in many years as a guarantor of stability and as a sort of, I think, a centerpiece of prosperity through an open trading order. As that set of issues is discussed and debated, it means that there are tremendous possible sort of changes. So in my mind, wherever we look, some key principles that shape the current environment in which we've been in for the last 25, 30, 40 years, since the post-World War II era at least, all of these are being rethought, reconsidered, reshaped. They're not being done in the smoke-filled rooms of a hotel in Paris, of course. They're being done in a much more inclusive and open way, in which many different and disparate voices are being engaged, and I think that's critical. And that's why I'm so happy that we're having this discussion today, because, as I said before, there are no more important regions that are at the crossroads of so many of these issues that are reshaping the global order today than Central Asia. Its proximity to these new power sort of shifts, its importance economically in terms of resource provision, in terms of markets, in terms of connectors across markets and trade is absolutely critical. Its long cultural engagement, the Silk Road in Central Asia being so critical as a connector across the world makes this region particularly important to understand the broader global shifts. This is a region that will contribute to those shifts, and it will also be shaped by those shifts. And finally, this is a region itself which is undergoing fascinating internal, domestic transformation with the change of leadership in Uzbekistan, with new and emerging economic engagements in Kazakhstan. You're just sort of seeing almost in every country interesting and important developments internally that are going to sort of shape this. So it just means that I know you're going to have a tremendously interesting and exciting set of discussions. This is a set of discussions today that not only impact what happens in Central Asia, but I think touches upon this remarkable global shift that we're sort of seeing. And I hope that as you continue your deliberations and your discussions, that you keep that global shift in mind. I hope also as we think about the role of Central Asia, and we think and hark back to 1919, we learned a lot of lessons. And the lessons in 1919 are both hopeful and indeed worrying and tempering, in the sense that what we've seen is principles that were developed there that are important and have shaped the 20th century, but we also saw that the mistakes there, not understanding the implications for how great powers try to shape the world, can lead to enormous tensions that can lead to violence, and that can indeed, as we saw in the aftermath of 1919, lead to renewed war. So the stakes are high, the importance is absolutely critical, and we couldn't be happier to have you here to discuss these issues as they relate to Central Asia and as they relate to the world. So I wish you all the best in your discussions. I'm kind of eager to hear what comes out. As someone who spent a lot of time traveling, engaging, being part of this region, it is something close to my heart, so I'll be really curious to see what comes out of your discussions today. And I want to thank you all for participating and being part of it, and welcome you here to Georgetown and to the School of Foreign Service for these discussions. So good luck, all the best for the day's deliberations.
Dean Hellman is a hard act to follow. I'm Andy Cutchins, Senior Fellow and Research Professor with the Center for Eurasian, Russian, and East European Studies, and I'm delighted to be here and to see everybody else here, and so happy that those in particular who came from quite a distance were able to get through the difficult weather in the last couple of days on the East Coast. I thought of making a couple of general remarks, but I think Dean Hellman was so articulate that I would only be redundant. So let me just say I'm very excited about every session of this conference, but I think that opening it with the Ambassadors Roundtable discussion amongst ambassadors from the region about what's going on in the region, their perspective on the region, their perspectives on their country's interests outside the region, I think is a terrific way to start the conference. So I'm very excited about it. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce the moderator for this session, Ambassador Richard Hoagland. Ambassador Hoagland is one of the most experienced and distinguished diplomats in recent memory in the U.S. Foreign Service, and he has tremendous experience in the region itself. There's a longer biography in the program, but just a couple of data points of significance. He served as our ambassador to feel like Hillary Clinton, trying to say Dmitry Medvedev, to Tajikistan, and also to Kazakhstan. He was the charge d'affaires in Turkmenistan, and in his last responsibility, he was the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for South and Central Asia. So, Ambassador Hoagland, thank you very much for agreeing to chair this session, and let me invite you and your colleagues from the region up to the stage and take over.
Good morning, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the very first panel of A Changing Central Asia in a Greater Eurasia. And indeed, it is changing. We're very honored to have 3 Central Asian ambassadors on this panel. Ambassador Kazykhanov from Kazakhstan, Ambassador Ibragimov, who is Uzbekistan's permanent representative at the UN, because Ambassador Bakhtiyor is traveling, doing some of his ambassadorial business today. And finally, Ambassador Toktogulov from Kyrgyzstan. So welcome, Your Excellencies. We very much look forward to hearing your presentations. As we look back over the last quarter century of the independence of the Central Asian states, we have to admire how they've worked to build nations from the ground up, each in its own way. And we have to admire how they, at the same time, had to work hard to guard their independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, especially from regional outside powers. And there are 4 big powers that they have had to balance all along and still do today. Of course, it's Russia to the north, China to the east, and then, as sometimes they're fond of saying, and a little further away, there's the European Union and then the United States of America itself. But there are also other powers that have certainly played a role. We won't go into the details, of course, but Turkey and Iran have been partners and sometimes sparring partners from the very beginning of the independence of the Central Asian states, too. Now, a number of international organizations have arisen in the region during this period. One's most closely associated with Russia, I'm sure you're aware of, the CSTO, Collective Security Treaty Organization, and then more recently, the Eurasian Economic Union. From China, early on, there's been the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, and then much more recently, the Belt and Road Initiative. Excuse me. Both the United States and Europe have not formed a specific Central Asia regional organization, but certainly play a role together with those states as well as the former Soviet states, other states, with the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. So there are a number of organizations floating around with which each state has to deal. What we are waiting for, and I think we might begin to hear a little bit about this today, is how will Central Asia organize itself into some sort of association? It doesn't have to be a bloc, it doesn't have to have any specific organizational goal, but it does seem that the time is right to do something like that now. And in fact, very, very recently, in Astana, the 5 countries met, 4 of the leaders and a large delegation from Turkmenistan, in what was carefully called a consultative meeting, but with a promise to meet every year at the same time into the future. So that's enough of my introduction. I don't want to take time away from our ambassadors because I know they have much to say. Each one will give about a 10-minute presentation. Based on their presentation, then I will probably ask them a few questions. And then I certainly hope that we will keep time so that you folks in the audience who have your own expertise will be able to ask a few questions too. So to start with, I'm going to turn the microphone and the podium over to Ambassador Kazykhanov of Kazakhstan. Please, sir, it's your turn. However you'd like to do it. You have a microphone there. If you'd prefer to sit, that's fine.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I would like to good morning, everyone. I would like to start by saying thank you to Angela and Dr. Kachins and Dean Hellman for hosting this important and timely conference. I recognize Emmy, Chevron, and thank you, Chevron, for your continuous support. And Ambassador Hoagland, colleagues, I'm also delighted to see you here at the panel. And I also want to take this opportunity to extend my congratulations to everyone and wish happy Nowruz. You know that 300 million people in the world celebrating Nowruz, and Central Asia is also a part of this festivity. And you know that the General Assembly a while ago has recognized 21st of March as the International Day of Nowruz, and UNESCO included Nowruz into the World Intangible Heritage List of Humanity. So I think it's important holiday, and that's another reason why Nowruz brings Central Asian countries together, so that we all celebrated this important holiday that symbolizes the beginning of the year, new year, and revival, renewable, and of course it's important for everyone. Now I would like to start by saying, yes, that on the 15th of March there was an important summit in Astana that brought together leaders of all Central Asia, and the uniqueness of this summit is that we didn't have similar events since 20 years ago. So if you look back, I mean, one of the latest summits that we had in the past was in 1999 in Ashgabat. But this time, leaders of the region decided to get together. In fact, I should recognize that the initiative was first proposed by the Uzbek president in Tashkent, when my president invited everyone to come to Astana and to hold the consultative meeting. The whole concept of this meeting was to boost closer economic cooperation, intra-regional trade, and expand regional transit and transport opportunities, and aimed at sustainable growth and well-being of the peoples of Central Asia. And I think that this joint statement that has been adopted after the meeting says for itself. So the countries of the region clearly stated that the destiny and the future of the region lies in the hands of the 5 countries of Central Asia, with all due respect to our neighbors, immediate neighbors, and distant neighbors, as you rightly mentioned, Ambassador Hoagland. And what is important is that, for example, we have only 8% of intra-regional trade represents only 8%. It is not fair. So we have to increase it, we have to expand it. And you know that last year my president paid a state visit to Tashkent, and 2 leaders agreed to increase the bilateral trade turnover from 2 billion to 5 billion by 2020, and it is well on the way. And generally speaking, the overall growth of economic growth of the countries of Central Asia over the last years were about 6.2%, which is not bad, I would say. But Kazakhstan export, for example, to the countries of Central Asia represents only 35% of its export, but we certainly eager to increase this number. And the good thing is that leaders agreed to convene this similar summits on a regular basis. So the next summit will take place next year in Tashkent, also on the eve of Nowruz celebration in the region. And there was another agreement and that was proposed by, the idea was proposed by Tajikistan to host an event on transboundary water resources and water issues, sustainable development in Dushanbe in June 2018, and this idea has been was supported by the leaders of Central Asia. I would like to turn briefly to the role of the United States, and of course, U.S. can and should play an important role in strengthening and helping countries of the region to foster their cooperation, economic cooperation, and we have an excellent format that is called C5+1. You know that we had a meeting in this format, foreign ministers had a meeting at this format last September in New York. The first C5+1 meeting took place in 2016 in Samarkand 2 years ago, and we're very much looking forward to host next C5+1 meeting in Kazakhstan, hopefully when the State Secretary will visit our region, and we hope it will take place. And I think that what other issue that I wanted to touch upon is Afghanistan. Of course, we understand that region has a lot of internal problems, as I said, transboundary water resources, border issues that luckily are now being resolved, and illicit migration, drug trafficking, and so we are not immune from terrorist radicalism and other things. So we are not immune from this kind of threats, but we strong leaders and peoples of the region strongly believe that only united we can meet these challenges. And there is another external threat that we have is Afghanistan. Countries of Central Asia supported the South Asia strategy that has been announced by the United States last September, and you know that we are providing support and humanitarian assistance to the Afghanistan government, and Kazakhstan, for example, has in the past has provided financial support to the Afghan National Security Forces, and we are committed to continue our support this year and next year for the Afghan security forces by, financially, as it was mentioned in the joint statement during the visit of my president to Washington. We will continue to train Afghani students, and we already had 1,000 Afghan young people who studied in Kazakh universities, and we announced the continuation of this program that will be fully covered by Kazakh government. And by the way, we have tomorrow Minister of Education coming to Washington, and he will have a number of meetings here, and so I'm sure he will touch upon this issue as well. And on top of that, Kazakhstan has initiated to convene a conference on empowerment of women, Afghani women. We strongly believe that it is the right time to pay more attention on the role of women in Afghanistan. But generally speaking, what we believe is that there is a nexus between security and development in Afghanistan, and Central Asia can play a role in that. And we want to embrace Afghanistan economically because we strongly believe there is no military solution to the Afghan problem. And yes, I mentioned that that my president paid a historic visit to Washington in the mid of January. There was a very good meeting, and my president had a chance to brief colleague leaders of Central Asia during the March summit about his visit, about his meeting and discussions in Washington. Belt and Road. Well, I think that Belt and Road is an important initiative for Kazakhstan because we see benefits in increasing transit potential. Well, many of you know that China attaches great importance to develop cooperation with Kazakhstan, and well, China calls Kazakhstan buckle on the belt, but no routes can bypass Kazakhstan, and we represent the land bridge. And I give you figures that by now we have about 70% of land transit going from Asia to Europe, crossing Kazakh territory. So last year we had about 1,700 container trains crossing Kazakhstan. So by 2020 there will be about 5,000 container trains, and 70% of them will be going through the territory of Kazakhstan. So it's beneficial for us. We're earning a lot of money from transit, and it is also matching with our national program that we call Nurluzhol, which is the bright path. It's quite an ambitious infrastructure program that my government has launched about 5 years ago by building railroads, motor roads, renovating airports, and the Caspian seaports, etc. I'm already talking too long. No, let me say about the Belt and Road. There is a number of interesting projects that many of you know. The Horgos special economic zone, which is the dry port right on the border between Kazakhstan and China. We also about to complete the construction of the new cargo terminal, new cargo port, which we call Kurik. It's about 30 kilometers to the south from Aktau. And you know that there was a pilot train from China to London, 18 days, 7,500 miles, which crossed a vast territory in 2 weeks' time. And Kazakhstan also has built a terminal in Chinese port Lianyungan, and we have a terminal in Iranian port and in the Hormuz, and there are many other interesting projects that we are developing, and I know that there will be a conference on Caspian transit that will take place in May, and we expect that there will be a delegation from Kazakhstan that will come and share more information about infrastructural projects. So what I wanted to say that you know that the Belt and Road Initiative has been first announced in 2013 in Astana, in Nazarbayev University, when Xi Jinping paid an official visit to Kazakhstan. Well, I also would like to refer to some brochures that we brought. It's 5 social initiatives of my president that he made about 2 weeks ago, and you can find them on the tables. We think it's a right move into the right direction. So he announced the program Make Housing More Affordable and reduce tax burden and to increase access to quality education and expand lending to small business and, most important, to bring gas to Astana capital. So those initiatives are very, very timely, and we also brought a copy of the State of the Nation address that my president made in the beginning of February, and if you're interested, you can read more what's going on in Kazakhstan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for that excellent overview. Now, just to explain a little bit so that no one reads anything nefarious into the order of speakers, I am simply going alphabetically by country.
No, I'm fine.
Well, if you would like, but shall we? Yeah. Then let me turn the floor to Ambassador Ibragimov, representing Uzbekistan. Please, sir.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador Hoagland, and I'm very delighted to see you after so many years. In Uzbekistan, we do know you as a good friend of our country and Central Asia as a whole, and we very highly appreciate your involvement and your continued interest in our region. Your Excellencies, my fellow colleague from the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished expert and guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me extend my sincere appreciation to Georgetown Center for Eurasian, Russian and East European Studies, and personally to Dr. Angela Stant and Andrew Kuchin and other correspondents for hosting this event that, from my perspective, is a very timely and very meaningful event given the very important processes that are taking place in and around the Central Asia. As Ambassador Hoagland mentioned that today our ambassador to the United States, Mr. Wahab, was supposed to be here, but due to the arrival of a delegation from Uzbekistan, he had to travel to Seattle, and therefore I'm here to represent my country on his behalf. From Uzbekistan perspective, Central Asian countries have great potential for cooperation and development because we share the common spiritual, historical, cultural heritage. We are brought together by the unity of faith, the closeness of the languages, and people's mentality. In addition, the countries of this region has common transport communication networks and economies that complement one another. From this perspective, in Uzbekistan, we strongly believe that Central Asia, being located in the heart of the Eurasian continent, can once again play an important role as the main intersection on the interregional transport transit corridors connecting the East with the West. In this context, the current policy of the government of Uzbekistan on further strengthening the relation with immediate neighbors opens the strategic opportunities for establishing a trustful dialogue and building a long-term constructive collaboration. One must admit that currently Uzbekistan government, not only by its words but by its deeds, demonstrates that Central Asian vector remains as the main priority direction in its foreign policy that is stipulated in the foreign relation policy concept of Uzbekistan. Today, thanks to the bold and very proactive policy conducted by President of Uzbekistan, Shavkat Mirziyoyev, that has been embraced by all leaders of Central Asia. In Central Asia, we are observing a fundamental shift in relation between the countries of the region. Contact among the heads of state skyrocketed and led to the increase of political trust among our countries, and we have begun talking about the benefits of cooperation rather than confrontation. We started sharing a common view about the need to find reasonable solutions to long overdue regional problems. As a result of such a shift, the countries of Central Asia have altered an old narrative that had been prevailing in the American expert community, as if the countries of Central Asia are not ready or less inclined to forge regional cooperation. The government in this regard, I would like to mention also about the close collaboration between Central Asian countries in the United Nations. So I'm from New York, and I would like also clue you in what's going on in the United Nations. Currently, we're advancing with our fellow countries in Central Asia a joint resolution entitled Strengthening Regional and International Cooperation in Ensuring Peace, Stability, and Sustainable Development in Central Asian region. That was a result of the conference held last November in Samarkand city on security situation and sustainable development in Central Asia. And based on that outcome of that conference, the countries of Central Asia decided to put a to unite their effort to develop and adopt United Nations General Assembly Special Resolution on Central Asia. The government of Uzbekistan also tried to actively collaborate with neighboring countries to jointly address security situation and sustainable development in our region. As Ambassador of Kazakhstan mentioned, our president last year proposed to convene a consultative meeting of the head of state of Central Asian countries, and that initiative was brought to fruition last week in Astana, as the ambassador mentioned, where we held the first inaugural meeting of the head of state of the 5 Central Asian countries, and Turkmenistan was present at the level of the head of the legislative body. And in Astana, the head of our countries discussed issues pertaining to forging economic, political cooperation, to develop interaction in the field of promoting humanitarian and cultural exchanges, as well as the exchange opinions on how to confront common threats like terrorism, extremism, illicit drug and weapon smuggling, etc. And also we exchange opinions on how to preserve peace and stability in our region. And the next meeting of the consultative group of head of state will take place, as the ambassador mentioned, in Uzbekistan next year. And now I would like to highlight Uzbekistan's vision about the specific measures in advancing its relations and cooperation within the Central Asian region. It's first, to develop mutual trade and economic ties. As the ambassador of Kazakhstan already mentioned, that currently the trade between the Central Asian countries consists only 8–10%, while wherein in the European Union, this figure exceeds 60%. Therefore, at an international conference on regional security and sustainable development last year in Samarkand, our president proposed to establish regional economic forum to provide the representatives of the business community of Central Asian countries within a platform to discuss issues pertaining how effectively advance mutually beneficial cooperation in the area of trade, investment, etc. In our opinion, such a forum would be conducive to develop and better understanding and increase the level of awareness of the business community represented about the announced initiative and project in various fields that will encourage them to take active position and be actively involved in the implementation. And I would like also just to mention that last year alone, Uzbekistan, thanks to the active increase of contact with the neighboring countries, was able to increase its trade turnover with Central Asian countries by 20%. In some cases, with some countries, it exceeded almost to 70%. And second, to develop transport infrastructure and increase logistical support of the region. Building alternative transport corridors is crucial for Central Asian countries, given the fact that Uzbekistan and other Central Asian countries are landlocked, and to diversify its transport corridor to world market would be conducive to increasing their export potential. And currently we are working with neighboring countries on simplifying transit procedures, also with other countries of the region to develop various alternative transport corridors, because we have to diversify to build transport corridors not only northbound, but southbound, eastbound, westbound. because it's very important to achieve sustainable economic growth. We also believe that it's necessary to develop and adopt a region-wide program of development of transport communication. To discuss our common approaches, Uzbekistan is planning to convene next year an international conference entitled Central Asia in the System of International Transport Corridors, Strategic Prospects and Untapped Opportunities. Third, it's important to ensure security and stability in Central Asia. We do understand that to effectively confront common challenges as terrorism, religious extremism, transnational crime, illicit drug and weapons smuggling, we have to unite our efforts. And it's also indispensable to abandon the division of regional security challenges into one's own and that of others, and to adhere to the principle of indivisibility of security. And now I would like also to briefly mention about our approach towards Afghanistan. Uzbekistan fully supports the integration of Afghanistan into regional economic projects to help to build its economy, infrastructure, to construct various railroads. Next week, as you may know, in Uzbekistan, we will convene an international conference on Afghanistan entitled Peace Process, Security Cooperation, and Regional Connectivity. And we've invited a delegation from more than 20 countries, and the president of Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan will address the participants of the conference. And the main goal of the conference is to form a broad international consensus on the basic peace principle in Afghanistan, and secondly, to make a concerted appeal to armed opposition, including Taliban, to sit at the negotiating table with the government and to explore ways to put an end to the current conflict that had been going on almost for 40 years. I think it's high time to put an end to this conflict, and in the United Nations, we've been talking to UN officials, and we've been talking to various our partners that have been invited to the conference, and we feel that some kind of significant achievement, progress could be made at the Tashkent conference, because on the one hand, the government of Afghanistan has agreed to negotiate with Taliban and the other opposition group with no precondition, and the opposition group also making some signals that it's also right time to sit at the negotiating table. So we will make sure that this meeting in Tashkent would be constructively conducted. And on the eve of the Tashkent conference, we will also convene a meeting, C5 plus Afghanistan. This is a new format of the meeting between Central Asian countries and Afghanistan. It was proposed by the Afghanistani side, and they approached the Central Asian countries with such an initiative, and we supported it. And it was the first meeting of C5 plus Afghanistan in Uzbekistan in order to discuss issues pertaining how we can actively involve Afghanistan into various regional integration processes in Central Asia. Fourth, to complete the process of demilitarization and demarcation of the state border. It's very important. And recent development in Central Asia has shown that we made some progress in this regard. For example, in last year, on the margin of Samarkand conference, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan signed the treaty on the area of conjunction point of the state borders. And last September, during the state visit of our president to Kyrgyzstan, we've also were able to sign an agreement on 85% of demarcation, the border between the two countries. And hopefully, and we do hope that the rest of the 15% of the border will be also negotiated in a good spirit and will be able to make it settle in near future. The fifth is to resolve the issue of fair water use in the region and addressing the ecological catastrophe of the Aral Sea. In this regard, I would like to stress that Uzbekistan supports draft resolution on the use of water resources of Amudarya and Sirdarya river basin developed by the United Nations. And in conclusion, I would like to note that Uzbekistan strongly remains committed to further advancing relations with neighbors by taking practical steps. In Tashkent, we are convinced that friendly and good neighborly relations between the countries of the region are conducive to preserving peace and stability in Central Asia. We believe that Central Asia should become a region of cooperation, not competition. In this regard, Uzbek side is ready to work with the immediate neighbors as well as other partner countries in preserving peace and promoting mutual beneficial cooperation and turning the region to a zone of cooperation and sustainable development. That concludes my brief introduction, and during the Q&A session, I would be more than happy to accommodate any question you may have. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Excellent overview, and I was really pleased to learn some new things to look forward to there. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of follow-up on some of those new things that you have mentioned to us too. We certainly look forward to hearing from Ambassador Toktogulov. Kyrgyzstan has found its own place in Central Asia from the very beginning, as have the other countries, but with a different kind of reputation. Sir, we look forward to hearing what you have to say about Central Asia in general. Please, it's to you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Hoagland. It's great to be joining you and my fellow ambassadors, my colleagues from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. It's wonderful to see you come here all the way from New York, despite the snowstorm. It just underlines the importance of today's discussion. Dear friends, it's a pleasure to be joining you all this morning. I'd like to thank Georgetown University, its School of Foreign Service, and Center for Eurasian, Russian, and East European Studies for organizing and hosting this event. It's a very timely event, given all the positive developments that are taking place in Central Asia. And big thanks to our friend Andrew Kachins, who's been working on Central Asia for a while and has contributed greatly to a better understanding of Central Asia in Washington, D.C. and here in the U.S. It's wonderful to see you here at Georgetown. The event is being held just a day after our countries celebrated Nowruz, the spring equinox, which also symbolizes the start of spring, the start of a new year, as we say in Central Asia. Today's discussion is taking place just a few days after our presidents of Central Asian nations met in Astana to discuss the importance of regional cooperation. The meeting was historic, just for the fact that it has taken place. We haven't had such a meeting in a long while. It reflected the changing atmosphere in Central Asia between our countries. It also reflected and underlined that there's genuine realization in the region that the future of the region and our nations must be decided by ourselves. Really, for a while, there's never been a better and more optimistic time to talk about Central Asia, to engage with Central Asia. President Sooronbay Jeenbekov, who was elected as president of my country in November of last year, said that the meeting of Central Asia's leaders will serve to renew and boost our friendship. The meeting will give a new boost to our shared aspirations to bring our countries and peoples closer to each other, he said. President Jeenbekov also stated that the common goal for the presidents of Central Asian republics is to build new foundation for regional cooperation for the benefit of our countries. He believes that the meeting of the Central Asian presidents should serve not only the goal of integration between our countries, but also to raise the role and profile of our region in the world. He also added that the countries share same strategic interests, and each country will be stronger if the region speaks with one voice. And this is something that has been taking place in Central Asia as we come together to really find this one regional voice, to speak with one voice, because as we understand that it only makes us stronger individually too. Kyrgyzstan has always supported common efforts to strengthen regional cooperation and remain an active advocate for improved trade and economic relations between our countries. We will be supporting joint efforts to address common security threats too. Last year, we saw an historic breakthrough in our relations with Uzbekistan, as my colleague said. We signed an agreement on delimitation of 85% of the borders. And this is something that hadn't been resolved since our independence, and it took us more than a quarter century to come to an agreement, to this agreement on 85% of the borders, and Kyrgyzstan is optimistic that we will be able to conclude the remaining part of the negotiations in the spirit of mutual respect and benefit. And same work Kyrgyz government is doing with Tajikistan, as we are currently negotiating on the delimitation and demarcation of our borders with Tajikistan. So in that way, Fergana Valley, previously you would always see Fergana Valley, which is shared by Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan, as this restless valley, as a source of instability. Fergana Valley, with the collective effort of three Central Asian countries that share the valley, is becoming and turning into the valley of cooperation. The borders have become much easier to cross between, for example, Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. You would never see before this, so many people at the borders crossing and visiting each other. Regional governments, for example, in Osh and Andijan, generally all those regional governments are visiting each other. They're discussing what should be done to improve cross-border trade, what should be done to improve cultural exchange, as there's just so much that we have historically shared. And this is really turning Fergana Valley into the opposite of what has been portrayed about the valley. Kyrgyzstan believes that regional cooperation is important, and also the main approach that the government has in dealing with our immediate neighbors and other important allies is that we have to develop a bilateral agenda with our key partners and immediate neighbors in a way that would not come at the expense of our relations with others. So this is a very important approach that we have had, and President Jeenbekov, from the first days of his presidency, has underlined that relations with Central Asian countries, our neighbors, is one of the biggest foreign policy priorities for him, and this is reflected in his foreign travels, visits that he has had since coming to office in November. He has had official visits to Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan, and important agreements were signed. And most importantly, it gave an opportunity to build strong, also personal relations with his colleagues. And as you realize, in Central Asia, too, personal relationships matter. On this note, I'd like to wrap up, and hopefully I look forward to our discussion and Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Very good details that added to our knowledge here. I'm going to be watching the clock closely. I have two very general questions I'd like to ask our panel before we move into this. I'm not sure if we'll have time for two, so I'm going to start with one that might be just a little bit harder to answer. At the very beginning in my introduction, I mentioned the four powers that Central Asia has to pay attention to for one reason or another: Russia, China, European Union, and the United States. Since we are in the capital of the United States, I'm going to ask a question about U.S. foreign policy in Central Asia. And it's going to be a very broad question. I understand you're ambassadors and you have to watch what you say. I've been in the same boat, but I think everyone also appreciates some honest speaking from time to time. So here's my question. Even though we're further away, what role in Central Asia would you like to see the United States increase? And what would you also, looking from the other direction, say, maybe you should dial that back a little bit? How would you like to see the role of the United States change in Central Asia, if at all, either in a positive direction or in the other direction? So who would like to start with that? I'm not going to call in any order here.
Well, Ambassador, it's a very important question. I think that the history of our relations, of Kazakh-U.S. relations, goes back to the beginning of the 19th century, of the 1990s, when we worked together on removing nuclear arsenals from Kazakhstan. We think that the nuclear threat reduction program, non-Lugar program, was a success story in Kazakhstan, so we learned a lot. And at that time, it started in 1994, and at that time, the level of cooperation, the level of attention from the United States to the region was enormous because of the nuclear issues. And then when all their missiles were dismantled and warheads removed, so the interest a little bit slowed down. And then another phase started when Afghanistan issue became pressing, and the role of Central Asian countries as a transit, the northern distribution network, and all the support to the Afghan campaign has increased. But what we want to see a kind of long-standing relations and interest of the United States in the region. We strongly believe that United States can play an important role in fostering closer cooperation and integration between the countries in the region, and that is why the C5+1 format is so important. And certainly we think that, like for example, in case of Kazakhstan, we've been a reliable partner economic partner for 26 years already. Chevron, Exxon, and all the big oil companies been operating in Kazakhstan successfully, and they will be with us for a long time. So I think that all these problems, including Afghanistan, terrorist problems and other problems, will come and go, but the economic cooperation will stay forever, and we will want U.S. to increase its economic presence in Kazakhstan and in the region generally. And that is why all the countries are working hard to create a conducive environment for more American companies to come to the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm very glad that you mentioned our very early cooperation under the non-Lugar program. That truly was historic, and I think it benefited not only Kazakhstan, but certainly the entire world, and changed the direction of world history at that time. Very positive development. I'm sure, gentlemen, you have other ideas, please?
First of all, I would like to acknowledge the presence of John Herbst, our former ambassador to Uzbekistan, U.S. ambassador to Uzbekistan. We work together in promoting our bilateral relations. Welcome. At the outset, I would like to note that I'm from our mission to the United Nations, not to the United States. But based on my own experience working in promoting bilateral relations with the United States, I can just say a few words that over the past 26 years, we have various relationships, ups and downs. We have honeymoon, we have tense situations, but anyway, at the end, we always were right on the track, because we have plenty of issues to address together. These issues of regional cooperation, non-proliferation issues, as Ambassador mentioned, about the joint effort in combating terrorism, extremism, drug trafficking, and other organized crime. In this regard, we've been cooperating despite our discrepancies in certain issues, but those discrepancies over for the past 26 years have not prevent us from cooperating in the field where our collaboration were in the mutual interest. Therefore, we do expect that our relation with the United States will continue to develop. And I can just mention that our president on 2 occasions have already met President Trump, once in Saudi Arabia and once in New York on the sidelines of General Assembly session last year. And recently in January, they had a telephone conversation where both sides confirmed their attitude to their commitment to further forge the bilateral relation. And during the visit of our president to the United States last September, one of our priority areas for our relationship were economic and investment cooperation. And our president addressed the gathering of the American executives of various companies where he urged them to more actively engage in cooperative relations with Uzbekistan, because currently we have perfect environment for the foreign investors in Uzbekistan, and our president said that you are most welcome to our country. We're ready to expand our collaboration, and I think this is the main area where we can focus our attention on. And we're also working on other areas, and we are trying to fill gap where we have some discrepancy, but at the same time to forge mutual beneficial cooperation on the areas that meet our interests. So all in all, we are in a position to continue our fruitful cooperation with the United States in all directions, so no banned areas.
Thank you very much. That's good to hear. Ambassador Toktogulov, sir?
To follow up what my colleague said, very important things. Kyrgyzstan would like to see more U.S. support for Central Asia's integration with world economy, given that the United States is the largest economy in the world with most innovative parts of its economy, high tech. Would like to see more of that in our cooperation with the United States, and would like to see U.S. engagement in strengthening economic cooperation within the region and between the United States and Central Asia. Would like to see pretty much more of economic presence of the United States in Central Asia. Second, I think this is something that will be also discussed in following sessions, is that none of, I'm sure my colleagues will also share this, we're not interested to see, this current confrontation between the United States, Russia, and some rhetoric that's taking place between the United States and China sort of spill over and onto Central Asia. We're very much interested in seeing Central Asia as the region of cooperation, and we're certainly not interested in being caught up in sort of some hostility and confrontational rhetoric that has been taking place recently between bigger powers. But generally, I think Central Asia would like to see increased integration with world economy. That's a big priority for us.
Okay, thank you very much. You saw that I was taking notes there because I certainly plan to use your answers for some of my future work, and I certainly hope our policymakers were listening to what you just said, because I think there were very good ideas there. I was going to pursue one more question on Belt Road Initiative, but I'm watching the clock very carefully because normally I'm in your position, not in the stage, and I know that I always have questions to ask the experts, and I'm eager to do so. So I'm going to forego my second question, and I'm going to turn it over to our audience. I know that there are many experts in the audience. I see many of them that I know well, and there are students in the audience too. Let's start with Andy right up here.
Thank you, Dick, and thank you very much Ambassador Ibragimov, Kazykhanov, and Toktogulov for all coming today to participate. Ambassador Ibragimov mentioned, I think, the discussions about a regional economic forum in Central Asia. And I wondered if you could talk, each of you could talk a bit more about that, and also how this would relate to cooperation in the context of the Eurasian Economic Union, which I don't believe was mentioned or featured much in the opening discussion, as well as the Brick and Road initiative to slide in Ambassador Hoagland's question as well.
Well,
Take the lead. I won't choose here.
thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you for this question. But before answering to your question, I want to come back to the previous question and add that what U.S. can do for the region, and specifically Congress can do for the region, is to graduate us from the Jackson-Vanik Amendment and grant us permanent normal trade relations,
Yeah, we agree.
which is not fair. I mean, and Kyrgyzstan did it successfully a few years ago, but two big countries. I mean, we deserve, I think, and I think that School of Foreign Service can play a role in that as well. Well, speaking about the Eurasian Economic Union, you know that that was an initiative of my president that has been voiced at the beginning of the mid of 90s, when he said that after the break of the Soviet Union, we have to think about some kind of integration among the countries of the region. And so it was not kind of moving fast. And then on 2010, the agreement has been signed between three countries, Kazakhstan, Russia, and Belarus. And then two other countries joined the union. How Kazakhstan see this organization? I mean, if you look into the name of the organization, it says Eurasian Economic Union. We pay more attention to the middle word, economic cooperation. So being the landlocked country, the largest landlocked country in the world, by removing tariffs, by removing barriers, we thus bringing the European borders closer to Kazakhstani borders. We think that, I mean, initially it was thought that Eurasian Economic Union will help us to boost our trade cooperation. We were, the leaders were talking about four major freedoms: freedom of commodity, manpower, finance, and services. So far, what we managed to agree on freedom of commodities and freedom of manpower. Finance, I mean, I think it will take some time. Services, you know, European Union was negotiating services for 40 years and they didn't succeed. So again, we are not rushing. We are moving gradually. We say again and again that this is a purely economic union. We don't want to politicize this institution. And unfortunately, yes, because of the current standoff between Russia and the West and the sanctions that has been imposed, of course, the union experiences some shortcomings, but again, as my president mentioned, that all these problems are come and go, but we strongly believe that there is a great potential that in the future, the Eurasian Economic Union and the European Union can cooperate and can strengthen its cooperation. We also want to expand and deepen our cooperation with Asian countries, first and foremost China, but certainly I can agree that this time, unfortunately, the Union experiencing some problems because of the overall political situation, but the trade turnover, nevertheless, between Russia and Kazakhstan is growing. We Russia is one of our biggest trading partners, but coming back again to the role of the United States, we think that U.S. can play a role in fostering the intra-regional trade in Central Asia. Thank you.
Other answers, gentlemen? Or shall we move on?
Well,
Please. No. I want everyone to have the chance here.
Eurasian Economic Union is an important union for Kyrgyzstan because Russia and Kazakhstan, for example, are one of our largest trading partners, important economic partners. And we also have, we border, for example, China. China is an important trading partner, but we also have, as members of WTO, there are some trading mechanisms that we use to facilitate our trade with China. So we don't believe that our membership in the Eurasian Economic Union sort of undermines our cooperation with the United States. With the United States, we have an important relationship, but where we previously had security cooperation on Afghanistan, for example. Currently, if you look at Kyrgyzstan, we host, and I'm a proud alum of that institution, American University of Central Asia. We have Peace Corps programs. We have largest regional bureau for Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, which is celebrating 65th anniversary this year. So 2 years ago, we saw the establishment of U.S. Kyrgyz Business Council, so that really indicates some of our priorities for relations with the United States, that would like to see increased economic cooperation, would like to see increased private sector presence in Kyrgyzstan. And if U.S. companies are willing to and we encourage actually to look at Kyrgyzstan as sort of this launching pad for their activities in either Central Asia or the Eurasian Economic Union.
Very good, thank you.
And given the time constraint, I'll be brief in my responses. First, as to Regional Economic Forum. This is envisioned as a platform for the discussion of the representative business communities of Central Asia, how in the best way to develop business cooperation between themselves, advance trade, and cooperate in the field of investment, etc. So it's sort of platform. And in terms of Eurasian Economic Union, so it's not in the agenda. Uzbekistan currently opts for developing its trade relation with other countries within the already existing bilateral arrangement, both with the Council of Central Asia and within the CIS. So this is my short answer to your questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question, the gentleman back here is ready. Yes.
Yes. My name is Lan Qingshan. I'm from China, but I'm also teaching in Geneva. Well, I'm running also a Belt Road think tank in Shanghai. I just have one big question for all of you, not a long one, just a very quick one. What from Central Asian countries' point of view is the relationship between Belt and Road project and the SCO? Because SCO seem to be expanding membership, all these Indian, Pakistan, even Iran's talking, Turkey. Is that two things, from your point of view, compatible or not? Or do you worry about it, this development in SCO? Can I have one technical question to the Kazakhstan ambassador here? Recently, I took a bunch of European think tankers to visit Hoagland, Special Economic Zone. I was a little surprised to see that the Chinese side, the Chinese mayor actually talked to me saying, we want to make it Shenzhen, the first special economic zone. But the Kazakhstan side, it's not quite, I put very politely. I don't know what's the reason. The discrepancy, the difference is so big. Is any technical problem?
Microphone.
Okay.
All right, focusing on Belt Road Initiative, other questions and specific questions here.
Thank you very much for your question. And we certainly fully support that the idea that Horgosh, the dry port Horgosh, can be a future Shenzhen or Hong Kong. So, and it is our hope and desire that it will happen eventually. I agree with you that the Chinese side is developing much faster than the Kazakh side, to my mind, simply because Chinese economy is much bigger than the Kazakh economy, and there is much more potential from the Chinese. I know there is high-rises already and warehouses on the Chinese territory, and there are not too many buildings on Kazakh territory. But certainly the government is attaching a great importance to that. We had a visit of a group of foreign ambassadors to Horgosh, and I'm sure that there are plans to boost, develop, pay much more attention to that. And we know that the Chinese company is now took a large portion of this special economic zone, and we certainly committed to develop it. And we think it's a unique experience because it has some relations to the history. You know, the Silk Road started many centuries ago. So there were 3 stars, 5 stars, 6 stars hotels on the way of the Silk Road. They were called caravanserais. So they were the dry ports. And so we are bringing back the history. I mean, we are building those dry ports on the way of the Silk Road. And you asked about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and Belt and Road, the relations between two.
Compatibility.
I think that the concept of Shanghai Cooperation Organization is much broader than the concept of the Silk Road Initiative. Although, if I'm not mistaken, the full title of the Belt and Road Initiative is One Belt, One Road, One Destiny. And so that it means that it's not only about the transportation cargo, it's also about culture, history, education, science, and everything that comes with the closer cooperation between the countries of the region. I think that these two initiatives, they are not duplicate each other, they simply supplement each other. And Kazakhstan attaches both great importance both to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, as if we were founding members of this organization, and the organization itself started with the confidence-building measures on the border. You remember that? So there was a heavily militarized borders from both sides. So by removing all these military arsenals from the border, building a border of trust and confidence. Now we forgot already about the history. We are talking about the border cooperation, trade cooperation between the countries, and cultural exchange, etc., etc. And again, we pay strong attention to Belt and Road Initiative because Kazakhstan is the biggest transit country on the way from Asia to Europe. Thank you.
So just a couple of words about One Belt, One Road initiative, because the relation between Shanghai Cooperation Organization and this initiative has been already excellently described by Ambassador of Kazakhstan. So Uzbekistan fully supports this initiative, One Belt, One Road initiative, because as I mentioned during my presentation, for us it's extremely important to diversify transport communication network. And the initiative proposed by the Chinese side is fully in the conformity of our desire. And one positive thing about this initiative, it is inclusiveness, because it's open arrangement for everybody, for every country to join, and it's not constrained sovereign right of the member state, for example, participant, to develop economic ties or to choose their partners. So from that perspective, it's very appealing, and we are very supportive of this initiative.
Yeah,
what?
I'll just say briefly on One Belt, One Road initiative. It's an important initiative because it also allows us within the region, countries of Central Asia, to get links and strengthen transportation links, for example, within the region. So in that terms, it's a very beneficial initiative for the region. So Kyrgyzstan supports that initiative. And SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is a very unique organization as it brings together countries of Central Asia, but also countries like Russia and China, and you see India and Pakistan as engaging with the organization as part of the organization. So it's great to see all member states and observer states sit together and discuss issues of cooperation. The organization really contributes greatly to increased cooperation, mutual trust within the region and with other regional powers.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I saw a hand on this side of the room that's been waiting, and I think this is, thank you, Angela. This is going to be the last question because I'm a stickler for staying on schedule, and I know the rest of you want that too, so we're looking for an incisive, precise question for the final question here.
Stanley Kober. I'm wondering where the money will come from for the Belt and Road. The IMF, in its recent report for the G20, said, quote, China should keep reining in credit growth and addressing financial risks. Now, if China is supposed to rein in credit growth, does it have the money to finance the Belt and Road? If not, where does the money come from?
May I add to that before you answer, because that was going to be part of my second question. I'll keep it very short. I'm sure that a number of you in recent days have read some of the articles that have been posted about the question of direct Chinese donations for projects or financing of projects and the fear of getting into deep sovereign debt. So I think that might be part of the question too here. Sir, anyone else up here ready?
Well, I want to mention that even before the Belt and Road Initiative, my president announced a very, I would say, ambitious program that we call, and I mentioned that in my introductory remarks, we call it Nurly Zhol, which means the bright path. So we started to invest heavily into building our own infrastructure. So we built a motor road that we call Western China, Western Europe. It's a two-lane, both direction concrete road stretching all the way from the Chinese border to the western part of Kazakhstan and entering Russian territory. And it is a multi-billion project. It has been completed 2 years ago, and the uniqueness of this project that it goes all the way from the central part of through the central part of Kazakhstan. In some parts of the road, 800 kilometers, no man zone. So what does it mean? You can imagine. And we built in the past, in the former Soviet Union, all the railroads were going from south to the north for the understandable reasons. There were no railroads going from east to west. So we changed the pattern. So we built a connection between east and western part of Kazakhstan. So now we have multiple railroads connections going all the way from the Chinese border to the Caspian Sea, to entering Russia, entering Iran. And that's another initiative that has been done by Kazakhstan, and we are using our own resources, and we are also using the money of the international financial institutions, including the World Bank and Asian Development Bank, Islamic Bank, and And when the Belt and Road Initiative has been announced, it was matching with what we were already doing in our country. So we became founding members of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and that's also one of the sources of the finance to the projects in the region. And again, we see that the investment into infrastructure is very important. It was the words of my president who said that if we will not invest now into the infrastructure in Kazakhstan, we will be blamed by future generations that we lost time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further comment on that, or if Ambassador?
Yes, also a couple of words. You know, first of all, projects that have been realized within the One Belt, One Road are commercial project, you know, and it stipulates the participation of the interest parties, including various international financial institutions. If they're interested, they will join. Otherwise, you know, it would up to those countries that implemented this project to seek financial resources for the implementation. And currently, we are working with our Chinese partner and Kyrgyzstan to build a railroad connecting all three of our countries. You know, we are also approaching various international organizations, institutions with a proposal to finance, and you know, it's underway, and we are looking forward to the very short launch of the construction of this railroad.
Okay, thank you very much. I learned a lot. I have many questions. We have more to hear today, so let's move right along. But first, be sure to thank our ambassadors for their participation this morning. I'm very pleased with it.